Hey guys, welcome back to This Is Life Unfiltered. I'm your host, Alexa Curtis.
A few weeks ago, I was at a conference in downtown LA, and I was sitting front row at a panel that happened to be with the founder of Cloud10, which is this podcasting creation network that was founded recently, I think. And there was a panel with Phillips, who is an actress, and then Caissie St. Onge. And I loved this panel, and I thought that it was so cool because I rarely am around two incredibly authentic women. Usually I feel like I'm around someone who's authentic and then someone who's like talking and you're just kind of like, what are you talking about? Both of these women were just captivating. So I asked her to come to the studio today and be a guest. And I didn't realize up until about an hour ago that she is from Connecticut. So thank you so much for being here with me.
My pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
Well, usually I would take the people who are listening kind of through the beginning of the story and college and all of that. But your journey really started at a cool time. And I want to start your story in this conversation off when you got this internship with David Letterman.
Sure.
And I read something online that said that when you went to the interview, he said something like, you just kind of seem all over the place and I don't know what you're doing, but I really just want to help you out.
Yeah, I mean, well, what had happened was we were just talking a little bit, and I was saying that my college, Fitchburg State College, in my hometown, the college where my parents met, the college where I also met my husband, the college where my mom also attended, went back to get her master's degree when I was getting my undergrad. So I really did go to college with my mom, like that Melissa McCarthy movie. So when I was attending, I was a film and television major, and one of the final requirements for graduation, your last semester, you had to do an internship. And the school was really helpful at getting people internships in Massachusetts at like various, like I remember a lighting warehouse, like a professional lighting warehouse being very popular. And I remember my dean sort of saying like, are you interested in that? And I was like, no, that's not really what I want to do. I'm going to really go for it and apply for internships in Los Angeles, in New York City. New York City was a little bit more feasible, I think, because it was on the East Coast, and my boyfriend was already out in New York working for Comedy Central. So I applied at all these places in New York, and I wound up getting an interview at Late Night, which was David Letterman's late night show on NBC. And I went, and I really had a vision of being the writer's intern, like maybe I'll get selected to be the writer's intern. And so I went and I met with all the writers, and I just talked with all these guys all day. And then finally the internship director came around, the woman that had called me in for the interview, and she was like, I've been looking for you all day. And I was like, oh, I was like met with every single writer. And she was like, they already chose their intern like a month ago. And I was like, well, why? And she was like, they just love to talk to girls. Like, they just basically wasted your whole day. And I was like, okay, cool. So she was like, well, there's one more place that's still looking for an intern, so let me bring you by. And she brought me into Dave's office, and I met his executive assistant. And he came out and said hello, which really shocked me because I just wasn't expecting to see him. And, you know, said hello and was nice to meet you. And then he just asked me in that moment, like, well, can you drive a stick shift? And I said, no, sir, I cannot I don't know how to drive a stick shift. And he was like, well, that's kind of like the only thing that my intern really needs to know how to do. And I was like, okay, well, cool. It was nice to meet you. So I sort of left there feeling like, well, that's it. Like, I'm not getting this internship because I wasted my whole day talking to people that didn't need an intern, and then I couldn't do the one thing that. And then I wound up getting a call from the show saying, well, Dave picked you to be an intern in his office. So here's when you start. And I was shocked. And when I went to New York and started working, it took me a little while to get up the courage to finally be like, hey, let me ask you something. Why did you pick me to be your intern when I cannot do the one thing? And he was like, oh, okay, here's why. And he was like, I liked your shoes the day that you came in. I thought they were like cool, bold shoes. He was like, and then I saw your resume on a pile and saw where you went to school, and it was a state school. I also went to a state school. Anyone who went to a state school needs a little more help than someone that went to a fancy school. And then I read your name, and I was like, what a weird name. She's going to need even more help. And then he was like, and then I just remembered thinking like, oh, she's a smart person. She'll figure out the driving thing. Like if she never learns how to drive a stick shift, she'll figure out a way around it. So that's why I picked you.
I love that. So your actual title now, fast forward, is showrunner, and you're the executive producer on Busy Tonight.
Yes.
Which was on E.
Yes.
So I want to talk more about that. But before we get into it, what is a showrunner for someone who doesn't know?
Sure. Okay. So, what a lot of people don't know about TV shows, or I guess they do know, but it's, I don't know, it's an interesting thing, is there's all different types of TV shows. So, your scripted dramas and your half-hour comedies, and then you have your late-night unscripted shows, which aren't necessarily not written, but they're not word for word. Like nobody's performing drama, or nobody's performing like a teleplay. So a showrunner on a late night show is just kind of like the den mom. I like to think of like that's just the person that gets in there and, in my case, like developed the show with Busy and with Tina Fey. We were all executive producers, along with Tina's partner, Eric Gurian. We were all executive producers of the show, so we just really developed it. And it was really like, obviously Tina has like 50 jobs. So it was really Busy and I just saying like, here's what we want this show to be, and here's what we think people need to see on television. Here's what we think we would want to see on television. Here's what's been missing for us. So we developed the show, and then, you have to like obviously get network approval for every single thing, every single decision that you're making, and then, but hopefully they give you a green light, and then you get to the stage where you're like hiring the staff, and you decide like what the staff is going to be, and you interview all these hopefuls that are, wanting to come and work on your show, and that feels so awesome, to have people wanting to come and work with you. And a huge part of it for me was also thinking a lot about the culture of the show that we wanted to have, because I don't think that that's a thing that maybe every single showrunner thinks about, but because of like my own experiences and because of like, well, being a woman and trying to do this, it was something that was really important to me. So I wanted to think really hard about like what type of culture we were building behind the scenes, because I'm really a big believer that translates into like what you're putting out on TV. So, and then it's just like, it's just a lot of traffic cop, it's a lot of creative decisions, budget decisions, and
so you do everything.
Yeah, kind of. It's just like, I was so lucky at that show because I just really felt like I could trust everyone to do their job so well, so I just could like do my thing and make sure everything, happily say yes to so many things and only say no, if you have to say no to something, like pitch in and help think of like how you can recreate it so that it's something new and something that works for the show. So just that.
When you initially got that first internship with David Letterman, then you went on to Rosie O'Donnell, was your end goal to be like an executive producer or showrunner, or were you kind of just winging it?
That is a good question. I think my only real goal in life, and I think this was like a goal that I had since I was a little kid, and like a huge fan of the Muppet Show and like reruns of the Dick Van Dyke Show, I wanted to be a writer. And like so many things, I wanted to be a comedy writer, I wanted to be a late night writer. Rosie wasn't late night, it was daytime, but I think like it was the closest thing to late night that we had seen on daytime at that point. So I only knew that I wanted to be a writer, and never really planned to be on that. And I don't know if you're like, do you like set goals in your life and you won't let you're like, I'm gonna wait to do this thing until I like achieve X goal.
I love when a podcast guest asks me the question and I'm not prepared. No, I don't. I don't do that kind of stuff.
So like I was living with my boyfriend, and and he was living and working in New York City also in entertainment, and we had been together forever, and we were just like, okay, it's getting to the point where we're like thinking about getting married. I guess we were probably engaged at that point. And then I was really like, listen, there's certain things that I want to do like for myself before we get married, and one of those is that I want to be a staff writer on a show. And he was like, that's cool. And then I was like, and then that would enable us to put away enough money to like throw the kind of wedding that we want, because our parents weren't in the position to be able to do that. And I don't think we would have felt great about asking them. So, so he was like, okay, I can get with that. And I can't remember if he really had a goal. Is that terrible? I don't think he did. I think he was just sort of like, we're just, you know, because he's great. He was like, yeah, let's like work on your goal or whatever. And then that happened when I was like 24. And in a way that was kind of weird, because it kind of set me up to be so nervous that it was going to be taken away from me, you know, or that I was going to blow it and, you know, never be able to do it again or whatever. That wasn't the case. Rosie was the best possible person to work for, like as a fledgling writer. Jeanette Barber, our head writer, was the best, most nurturing person possible. I was so lucky, because who knows what would have happened if I had been a writer on any other show. I don't know what would have happened. It might have eaten me alive, but because I was where I was, I was allowed to like learn and grow wings there. So, but beyond that, I didn't really have a plan. Like, I just assumed that I would kind of be like a staff writer for the rest of my life. And then just over time, like various, you know, working on various things, I started producing a little just out of necessity sometimes, just because like you just need to. Yeah. And once you hit a certain age, people are like, here's the budget, by the way, like take a look at it, you know. So people start tasking you with more serious stuff, and you know, and then I started to like it and just be like, oh, actually, you know what? When you can be super creative with a budget, that is also rewarding. When you can be super creative with how to schedule something and get everything that you were dreaming of to work out, that's also rewarding. So it's not the same as writing a joke that everybody laughs at, but it's kind of amazing, too.
I love the fact that you are from a small town, that you didn't grow up with, you know, what a lot of people in, say, somewhere like LA to break into entertainment did. It doesn't seem like you had many connections.
No,
any.
Zero.
So it's amazing, because I'm the same, that to kind of show people that you can do it, and you were living proof of that.
Yeah.
So growing up, what did your parents do? And in high school and middle school, what kind of kid were you, and which group?
Okay, what did my parents do? My dad was always like a manual laborer. Like, he worked in an automobile rebuilding factory, like refurbishing auto parts. He was an ambulance driver for some time, he wasn't. I think he caused more injuries than he treated. Maybe God. And he worked off and on in retail, like working in the stockroom at Woolworths when I was in high school. My mom was a school teacher in Massachusetts. She was a biology teacher when I was a kid. And Massachusetts went through this really restrictive budgetary crisis in the 80s, Proposition 2.5, which just basically devastated the educational system, and she lost her job as a teacher, even though she was really beloved, teacher in the high school. And so she just got a job in a social working office. It was some kind of facet of social work, and from there she just really refocused her career on counseling and getting her master's in social work. And so she worked as a social worker until she retired.
So literally opposite of anything relating to entertainment.
Yeah. I mean, my dad was always a huge pop culture fan, a huge music fan, and a huge comedy fan. So he got a big kick out of what I did. But yeah, my I don't know, my mom has shows that she likes them.
But not now. Do you think that plays a role in a child, or I guess growing up, if your parents, because I find a lot of people who are incredibly successful in entertainment, their parents did nothing that was similar to what they do.
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, it's interesting. I was just talking to Busy about this, about our generation, and how we were really kind of the first generation of latchkey kids. I'm a little bit older than Busy, but the television was our babysitter a lot. So, which in retrospect, is kind of, I don't know, it's kind of great. Lin-Manuel Miranda talks about this too. He talks about benign neglect and how that really fed his imagination. And so while I'm sure that like having two parents working and having kids kind of like fend for themselves at home, or even if your parents were home, a lot of times like my mom would be like grading papers often, and I was sort of left to my own devices. And while I'm sure a lot of parents felt guilty, or maybe they didn't, maybe that's a more modern thing, that like parental guilt thing. While I'm sure that a lot of people probably wished it was different, also like it was kind of great to sort of just like be able to mind my own business and think what I wanted to think and draw what I wanted to draw and have like a weird imagination, be a weird kid. And so for better or for worse, I spent hours in front of the television observing like what would eventually become my career. And then as for me in high school, I was in the band, but also a cheerleader. Oh, cool. And I was in drama club, and I was, also like tried to run for student council every time with like medium success.
Did you have straight A's, or were you like a C or like B's?
I was a pretty good student when I was younger, and then as I got older, I think that, obviously I started like dating and hanging out more. I wouldn't say like I didn't like ever get in with a bad crowd or anything like that, but I think at some point I just realized that like I'm a perfectionist, and I was really making myself like insane trying to be perfect, and I was kind of like, for what though? Like I think it became pretty clear to me that I was gonna go to college in my hometown because that's what I could afford, or I was gonna go to like a modest college that I wasn't gonna be like splashing out on some Ivy League school or whatever, because that just wasn't financially in the cards for us. And so when I put it together that I could attend a modest college in my hometown, and that's probably where I was bound for, and that I could do that whether I was a B student or an A+ student, then I think I like chilled a little bit.
Did you?
Myself.
Yeah, kind of relax a little more.
Yeah.
Did you feel like growing up? You mentioned in the town and that staying there, and you would go there. Most people would go to college in their hometown and then never leave. Like you broke out of that. How did you do that?
I just really wanted to get out of there.
Yeah.
I love my hometown. There are many great things about it, and I'm still friendly with a lot of people from back there. And a lot of people from back then went on to do like really amazing, impressive things. So I think, I just wanted to, again, like, I think I just had an epiphany that, like, New York City is not far from Massachusetts. It's just not. It's a few hours drive, and the fact that I'd never been there in my whole life seemed insane. I'd barely ever been to Boston. And then, so when I got my driver's license and was independent, like, I would drive myself to Boston to buy, like, a pair of shoes or something, like, at a cool store, and with money that I had earned at my drugstore job. And so, so I just sort of was like, like, New York is like a stone's throw further than Boston, really. And so that's where everything's happening. Like, I owe it to myself to at least try this.
Yeah, it kind of resonates with me because everyone I went to high school is still in that same hometown, which is, I think 5 people left, which is not a bad thing. I'm just fascinated by it.
You'd be so surprised. I mean, in Westport, Connecticut, I remember, like, the time when my kids were little, and all the moms would bring the kids to the bus stop, and so we had a bus stop at the end of our street. And I remember being like, oh, I really wish the bus would hurry up because I have to like catch the train into the city to get to work. And I remember one of the moms saying like, oh, it so impresses me that you go to New York City every day. I've always dreamed of going there. And I was like, we live a 40-minute train ride from New York City. Why have you never gone? And she was just like, she just acted like it was another planet, and it just wasn't a thing for her. And I was like, I'm going to bring you to New York City, and we're gonna go see the Rockettes or whatever. It's literally right there.
Yeah.
Like, but I think it's just a mindset. For some people are like drawn to it, and some people are, I don't know, repelled by it. I don't know if repelled is the right word, but just like fearful.
I think also a lot of people are honestly more fearful of change or feeling out of their element.
Yeah, or loving it and not being able to live it or whatever. I remember like having like my favorite aunt and her husband came to visit a few times. Like they came for my wedding, and I think they came another time, and we just dragged them all around town. And like, I think they, like the look on their faces, the smiles on their faces were telling me that they were having the time of their life. They also took every opportunity to be like, we could never live here. And I was just like, okay, no one's making it.
100%. Yeah, my mom does the same thing. Anytime we go to any city, she says the same thing. And she lives, I would think people in Westport would be much more prone to going to the city compared to Mansfield stores. But I guess if I lived in Westport, I would be there every hour.
Who knows?
Why not?
I mean, listen, I love having the best of both worlds. I love having a Bed Bath & Beyond with a parking lot, and I love like being able to go into the city, do whatever. And you know, same with LA. Like, you know, there's very metropolitan parts of LA, and then there's parts where you can like park on the street and not worry about it.
So at what point did you decide to move to LA? Because it's completely different than the East Coast, but you got the opportunity out here.
I was working at this show called Watch What Happens Live on Bravo with Andy Cohen for 9 years. I was there.
And what was your position there?
I was co-executive producer of that show, and I loved that show, and I really felt like I contributed a lot to the voice of that show. But also 9 years on any show is a really long time, and it was also like a kind of a grueling schedule. You don't really, like, that's one thing people ask me a lot about Andy and like what he's like, and I'm like, that guy has the energy of, I can't even describe it, because it was a grueling schedule. It was grueling for everyone. That show really was live at 11 p.m. and we were working all day on it prior to, you know, so it just was like, it was a long time and a lot of years where I didn't see my kids as much as I wanted to, and I was tired when I did see them, but it was also like a really great job. And I have really great kids who are like, they just are great. They're always the ones that are like, you know, what you do is what makes you the mom that we love. So please don't worry about like not having a sandwich with us.
Yeah.
Like, go do your interesting thing that you do. And I've always been the kind of person that like is like, oh, by the way, my kids are coming here, like when I'm working at a place. So like I never even really ask if that's cool with people, so hope it's cool.